listen, I think there's validity in the viewpoint that right now is a moment, a critical moment in our nation's not only present, but history. It will be viewed as such. And some of the largest, most influential, wealthiest black voices in this country are basketball players. And could their voices and resources be best served on the front lines, either literally or figuratively, of this movement rather than playing basketball? I don't think it's a ludicrous notion. Now, I also understand the counter argument, not to both sides of this, but I do think there's legitimate arguments on both sides of it, that for guys that don't quite have the profile of a Kyrie or certainly of a LeBron or Kevin Durant or Giannis, the biggest stars in the league, the best way they can have a platform is by playing, is by the league or the world seeing them, and whatever measures they choose to discuss in post-game interviews, whatever form those come in during this, kind of odd restart, or things they do on the court as far as symbolically. If you made the argument the best way for people to be focused on the NBA and what the players think needs to happen is by playing games, that's a legitimate argument too. So there are compelling arguments on both sides of this, but I can't just listen to the message on this one. To me, the messenger matters at least somewhat. And it's not just that Kyrie is a different type of cat, to put it, I think, most charitably. It's that this was not seemingly top of mind for Kyrie a week prior to him leading the charge on the NBA not playing. I know in coronavirus time, our timelines are all screwed up. We don't know what day it is. But let me lay out the timeline. May 25th, George Floyd was murdered. May 29th is when the president sent out the looting starts, shooting starts tweets. June 3rd, Drew Brees gave his initial comments on the anthem. So this story had moved that far in that short period of time. On June 5th, Kyrie was on a conference call with a bunch of other guys where they voted unanimously to resume the season, where Kyrie is one of 6 NBPA vice presidents, one of the highest ranking people on the call. And according to Woj, on that call, the biggest concerns he brought up was, would he be able to use the sauna, and would alcohol be provided? And so that isn't to say the concerns he brings up now are unwarranted, because I think they are legitimate concerns. But we were in the midst of this moment on June 5th when Kyrie did not seem to be willing, as he evidently said, give everything he has up for social reform. So I'd also be very interested to see what moved Kyrie so much in the week between June 5th and this past Friday to where he seems to be leading a charge for everyone not to play basketball wilds.
Yeah, Nick, I tried to read as much as I could and listen to as much as I could this weekend. And I've said it before on the show, when Steven Jackson talks, I listen. And Steven loves the NBA more than anyone. And he said it's not a time to play. And it really, that one hit me harder and it made me really think, because I understand the platform of the NBA. Of course, I produced the NBA for years. I know that 30 million people watch the NBA Finals. I know that commercials cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get messages out during the NBA. But when Steven said that, it made me pause and it made me think. And I understand that we are at a critical moment in this nation's history, and the national consciousness is focused on police brutality and systemic racism. And I understand that the idea that anything outside of that is a distraction. I think that's a valid point. I think that we've seen amazing flexibility and creativity from the league in getting this restart. So I think that's due to Michelle Roberts and Chris Paul and Adam Silver. And I'd like them to use the same amount of creativity and flexibility to blend. Hopefully, we saw Mike Bass's statement, Steven Jackson's concerns with the huge platform. And I'm interested to see what happens. And when as we move forward, I think Steven Jackson's voice has to be heard in this.
Hey, Broussard, let me ask you, A, what was your reaction? And B, how much momentum could Kyrie's movement, how much steam could it actually build up and pick up, and how far could it push it?
Well, let me address Nick's question about what kind of led Kyrie to this. He gave a nice timeline, but what I'm told, I talked to somebody who was on the call. What I'm told is that after the vote, it came to Kyrie's attention through conversations with players around the league that a lot of guys were concerned that their voice wasn't heard. So this conference call on Friday, while Kyrie certainly pushed his opinion that players shouldn't play, the purpose was really to hear guys out, to let guys have a voice, have a say, and see what they think. Now, obviously, Kyrie shared his opinion, and I actually think I love his sentiment because it's finally a recognition by black athletes of the great power they have. And, Nick, I would say that black athletes have the most power of any African Americans in the country to effect change because of their popularity, because of their wealth, and because of their unique skill set. Nobody can really do what they do. So they're necessary. They're irreplaceable. What is lacking, I think, at this point at least, is an execution plan, a strategy. Just sitting out to sit out would not really accomplish much. I get Kyrie's point is this to a lot of the players, because you said a lot of guys are saying, hey, we can, bring attention to the Black Lives Matter movement by playing games, our comments during the season and during the playoffs and things like that. Kyrie's point is we've done that. We've worn the I Can't Breathe T-shirts. The NFL players have kneeled. We've, held, been arm in arm during the national anthem. Like, they've done all of the symbolic gestures that players will likely do again once they start playing, and nothing has changed in his view. What I say is that the players need to make demands, attach demands to their availability to play. For instance, you could say, we want every NBA owner to start a management trainee program within his other corporations and businesses for African Americans. We want, over a certain timetable, the percentage of blacks in management at these corporations to reflect the percentage of blacks in the national population, 13%. Right now, it's like 6% of management positions are held by African Americans. These are the things that the players can speak to the owners about, speak to the league about, to effect change systemically. Because that's what we're talking about, systemic change. You could have owners in the NBA be a part of their requirement to be an owner in the league is to make sizable contributions to historically black colleges and universities that would help, take them to another level academically. Like there are all sorts of things that NBA players can demand or discuss with NBA ownership, Adam Silver, and so forth to try to effect systemic change. And if the NBA doesn't want to hear any of it, that's when you threaten not to play. But there has to be a strategy, not just this, we're not going to play, but have no demands with it.
So there's a couple things I want to add to that. I think those are all, by Wildes and you, Broussard, I think those are all extraordinary points. Wildes, you mentioned they should, listen to Steven Jackson. If I were an active player, the people I might want to call right now are Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'd be very interested in what they think we should do in this moment. Those are two icons, not only of the NBA, obviously, but I would say also two very important people in America's civil rights struggle who played, throughout for Russell, late 50s into the 60s and all of what was going on in the 60s, and then Kareem throughout the 70s and the aftermath of it into the 80s, and see what their take on it is. But I do think, Broussard, it's important to note that this doesn't seem like it is going to be, hopefully, a short-lived moment. That there will be positive change, even as we continue to see tragedies almost every weekend. I mean, what happened in Atlanta with Rashard Brooks this weekend is unspeakable. And so I don't think that this momentum for the movement's going to die out. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 380 days. And I say all that to say this. If the NBA players, and it's their prerogative, don't want to play in August and September, what facts on the ground will have changed by December where you then are comfortable playing. And, Broussard, when you say the value and the power the black athlete has, I agree. But if you got the black athletes in the NBA, the NFL, and Major League Baseball to all unite and say no sports are going on until these things are addressed, then I think you would have immense power. The concern I would have, Chris, is if the NBA says we're not playing, the NFL that train's going to keep moving. And I would imagine the NBA is more likely to give stronger voice and have more impact on effectual change via its star-driven vast majority black league than the NFL will. And so if we're worried about, Chris, people becoming distracted, the NFL is going to be right along by the middle of August. Baseball should be going by then. And I almost feel like the NBA, the players could be denying themselves a seat at the table if they don't play and those other sports do resume.
No, look, I hear you. And I've been saying for a while that black athletes should unite across the sport so that they can discuss things like this and have a strategy and a plan. It's the same thing with the protests going on right now. There needs to start being some demands made beyond just police reform or defunding the police, because, again, we want full systemic change economically, educationally, not just police reform. That's just one part of it. And so you're right. It's a very nuanced thing, but I'm glad that the athletes are finally beginning, in my view, to think about these things and understand and recognize the power that they have.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.